All right, we are live again on Saturday night. Um, oh man, what a week! I'm sorry. I'm sorry to you. I'm sorry to myself. Although I'm trying to work on not beating myself up too much. Um, in terms of factors that are outside of my control and my productivity not aligning with where I want it to be. Um, Last week I only put out 2 episodes, and it was the first time since I started that this happened. And there's, while it might not be the best feeling in the entire world to not achieve the goal that I set out for myself in order to what I believe will get me to success, um, it's just as important to, when that does inevitably happen every now and then, to not beat yourself up too much about it, and not to get too discouraged. And a less mature, a couple of years ago version of myself would have been greatly, what's the word for it? Disheartened by this, by this week. And I had to tell myself, yesterday, I probably spent a couple of hours trying to record an episode. I was gonna have a couple of guests. None of that, it didn't work out last minute, which is fine. It's part of life. Always happens. Other people have other schedules and other lives, and I'm very respectful of that. I try to be. And then I tried recording by myself, and I had a tough day yesterday, and nothing really crazy, nothing too tough. Just a lot that felt like there was a lot of events that would happen, and things could go either smoothly or not. And almost everything did not, unfortunately. So it was frustrating. I'm sitting here, and I'm doing take after take. I usually do one take and release in terms of this podcast. I record. I never listen back to it. I record. I finish the conversation, and I upload it straight to Spotify. Sometimes I'll wait a day or two. For example, if it's over a weekend, wait till Monday, or if I record 2 or 3 episodes in a day, I'll wait for the following day to post the recording. But I don't listen back to them ever, and I don't edit them. I just take them and I release them. And so it's very uncommon for me to go through multiple takes in order to release it. And I'm certainly not used to it. And I wasn't even really sure what I was going to talk about. And there were so many different things that are on my mind, and so many, when you're in a place of, I think that there's obviously different mindsets that we all go through and experience at different points based on what we're going through at that moment, based on the circumstance. And and my mindset, I was really all over the place, and I really wasn't sure what to talk about, which angle to come from, how to present, what my thoughts were. I wasn't even sure myself what my thoughts even were. And I'm still not 100% sure what these thoughts even were. I just knew that I was experiencing a lot of them, and I knew that I wanted to get this done, and I knew I wanted to post it. I knew I wanted to I didn't want to give up. And so I do one take for, I don't know, 10 minutes, and I get a work call. And obviously, and my phone's on do not, my phone I record on is on do not disturb while I record. So if someone from work is calling me, they have to call at least 2 times to get through to me. So, it's a pretty good barrier to prevent the podcast from being interrupted, but it doesn't always work. And so 10 minutes into one, I get a call, and then 10 minutes into another, I realize that I'm totally rambling. I have no train of thought. I'm not, I'm not saying anything of substance, and that's not like, I couldn't even follow myself. I couldn't tell you what I was even saying or where I was trying to go to in terms of what the podcast was about and what I was talking about. And then, so I had to stop there after about 10 minutes. And then I recorded for 45 minutes, and it felt great. And I was coherent, and I was thoughtful, and everything I was saying kind of felt like there was a good flow, and I was finally trying to get a good point across. And there were stories with thoughts injected into the stories, and it was really, really wonderful until I looked down at my phone and realized that somehow it stopped. I think, because it was in my pocket. I don't usually keep my phone in my pocket, but I was walking around and I didn't want to get out of service. I, I had inadvertently stopped the episode at 30 minutes. So I didn't know where it left off. If you have ever tried recording a conversation or a podcast, especially a solo one where it's just you talking by yourself, it's very, very difficult to pick back up into the flow of wherever you were. And it's not something that's necessarily easy. And so, I didn't have the time, I didn't have the effort, I didn't have the willpower. It was just such a long day that I just threw my hands up in the air and I said, you know what, this sucks, and I'll get it another time. And then I was supposed to have another guest tonight who it didn't work out as well, although maybe I'll record with another friend later. Saturday night, I am babysitting at the moment for my own baby. So I don't know if it's called babysitting. My mom gets mad at me for that. But I'm going to try to see if I could recreate the tone and the general idea that I was trying to capture yesterday, and see if I could try to even, now with even more perspective, just a day later, and getting to sleep on it and really think things out, try to really elaborate on it, because there was a lot that I wanted to talk about, and there always is a lot that I want to discuss, and at least share and put out food for thought, hear responses, hear feedback, and hopefully give you something to think about yourself. Um, so one of the things that I was talking about, what I was thinking a lot about, especially while I was dealing with yesterday, um, was when I was in high school, freshman and sophomore year. I hated the high school that I was in. I was miserable. I never wanted to go to the school to begin with. My mother had had a certain school in mind that she felt was best for me. And I have to give her credit because she is right about really almost everything that I ever have disagreed with her with, or everything that she thinks when it comes to a people perspective, when it comes to an emotional place perspective, when it comes to family, when it comes to maturity, when it comes to responsibility, when it comes to the really important things in life. My mother is is almost never wrong, and she's certainly almost never been wrong when it comes to steering me as I was growing up, and even giving me advice as I got older. And I felt that this was one thing that she was certainly this was the one thing that she was not right about. I did not want to be in the school. It was far from home. I didn't have any friends, or many friends that were going there. I had, maybe two or three friends. I made a couple of friends while I was there, but there was a big, there was actually an enormous gap, I guess we'll call it, or the barrier, social barrier that I experienced, which was that I was in New York, in Muncie, Rockland County, New York, and the school was in Teaneck, New Jersey. And when you're 13, 14 years old and you have parents that are working, raising a family, there's it's very difficult to get back and forth aside from the set mode of transportation for the school. So socially, even if I did kind of get along with a couple of people, it was very, very difficult for me to really to to build and maintain these kind of friendships, because I had to kind of get in somehow, but I didn't really have any kind of way of getting in any meaningful way. If I wasn't in a class with someone and I wanted to be friends with them, I couldn't hang out with them in school. It was very difficult to hang out with them outside of school, or even get to know them outside of school. And then also, this is a Jewish school where you have a dual curriculum. I'm not complaining. It was a wonderful thing, and it was actually excellent to show me what I'm really capable of in terms of being productive for an extended period of time. But school, you get to school and you're expected to start being on and active in your day at around 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning. And I would leave about 12 hours later, 6, maybe 6:30, 5:36 at night. Um, and then I would get home, and it would take me about an hour and a half to get home. Uh, there was traffic from Manhattan, from rush hour, from everyone coming back from the city, back to their families. and back from work, and we'd sit in traffic in the dark on the bus. And I didn't have friends, and I was in a school I didn't want to be in, and I wasn't doing well in my classes, even though. And I'd come home, I'd get home after an hour and a half of the bus ride, and I would sit down to a big stack of homework. And even though I wasn't a good student, it was certainly not for a lack of trying, at least for those first 2 years. And I'd have a stack of books and a stack of homework, and I would just I would work very hard. And there's a million different things, I'm sure, different factors that went into the reason why I didn't do well. Uh, I believe that with my whole heart that one of the reasons is that I was a year younger than the rest of my grade, and I really don't think that my brain was developed enough. Was developed uh, in conjunction or in step in line with the rest of the class and the rest of my peers. I was a full year younger. I would have been one of the older kids of the grade below me, and by some bizarre incident, I ended up in the grade above me, but as the youngest one. And there's always a sacrifice that people that are really, really brilliant and skip ahead and finish school early make, and there's a social sacrifice, there's a level of maturity, that people just have, like you're not mature, just as mature as your friends or your peers, and you really experience it's very challenging for a kid, but generally speaking, you might say, okay, well, it's worth it now because now I'm going to have an opportunity to pursue something greater quicker. I'm ahead and I don't want to be bored in my studies and I want to be able to build something, create something. And why would I waste time or take time that I don't necessarily have to, I don't necessarily, I don't need to be committing to, and I'll go ahead. But I didn't have that trade-off because I'm not that much smarter than my peers. Certainly not much smarter than, so smart that I was so far ahead of everyone else in the school. So I so I wasn't doing well in school either. I was at home to a massive pile of books, and I would just study and do poorly, and it was really difficult. I was down more often than I was not, and not in a depressed way. I don't think I wasn't depressed in the sense that I was not capable of experiencing fun and joy and a good time over the weekends, and flashes of humor and good memories throughout the year. But by a very wide margin, I was much more unhappy than I was happy. And my mom, who knew this, and I can't imagine, it's so interesting, looking back on it now from a different perspective, especially now that I have a child myself. I'm sure that it really, really hurt her. I'm sure it killed her to come home to watch her oldest son come home every day, a son that she felt that she was putting into this school for what's best for him, and what was going to what was going to lead to the most success and growth and health, and see how unhappy he is and say, there's such a conflict in the short term. It's so painful, but she really believes, and she really believed that it was the best place for me, and it was the best option for me as her, to grow and to become myself. And I mean, I don't have that deep of a existential challenge or pain with my son now, but even little moments like I know that he has to go to sleep, but he's crying and he's not feeling, he's crying and he wants to play and he wants me to hold him and hug him, and he hangs on to my shirt and he grabs my shirt with his fist while he sucks his thumb, and I know he has to go to sleep and I know it's good for him and I know that I don't want him to get sick and he needs to grow, and I just want like 5 more minutes or 10 more minutes of hanging out with him, and and there's a conflict between what you want right now and what's good for your kid. And to give my mom, I think my mom deserves a tremendous amount. My mother, she deserves both my parents deserve a tremendous amount of respect for for many, many different things in raising six kids and really creating an incredible family. But I think that this in particular must have been an extraordinary challenge for her to see her son unhappy and be committed to that long-term vision of this is for him and this is, for him to grow. And now I'm over 10 years out of high school, and I I I, I would not change what I experienced. And the reason I would not change what I experienced is as follows. Um, I'd come home from school at night, and I would just be I'd be miserable. And my mom had in the kitchen, she always is, and she always was full of life and enthusiasm and and believed wholeheartedly in expressing your passion and love for life and for the world around and family and friends and love. And and she always had she was always very creative and always very hands-on. And one thing that she always had that she implemented when I was growing up was this it's a dry erase board. And this dry erase board, she would leave messages around the house. She would divvy up responsibilities and chores for me and my siblings and myself. And she would leave messages. We'd play games at dinner. She would take the game Boggle, which is a board, and you try to make as many letters as possible connect with letters that connect and touch one another. And so she uses this smart board for everything, this expo board for everything. And she would write, and she would laugh, and she would do jokes and everything. And so she saw that I was going through whatever I was going through, this hard time, and she knew that this there was a very important tool, and there's an opportunity that she had to teach me something that I could take with me for the rest of my life. And so she would have on the board when I was coming home from school, she would leave it on the kitchen table. I'd walk in, and there'd be a plate with some food. Um, my siblings had already eaten by then. My dad was usually not home yet. He was still working 12, 14 hours a day easy. And and the boards had just M, like Mary, AGD, make a good day. And she would write it in animated letters and smiley faces and happy happy pictures all over it. And she didn't write have a good day, and she wrote make a good day, because she would tell me over and over and over again, the only thing that you could ever really control in general in life is your reaction to life. And the world could beat you down, and you could be unhappy in school, and your grades could not be could not be where you want them to be, and you could not and your teacher could dislike you, or you could just you could fight with your friends. And you get home, and you sit down, and you just want to just sit in this crappy, terrible mood. And you have an opportunity to make a good day. You're still awake for another hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 5 hours. Take the opportunity and make a good day. And it wasn't in a condescending kind of way, and it wasn't in a, oh, suck it up, don't be a baby kind of way. It was in the most loving, caring kind of way that I think was the perfect form of education that I think any parent could have done for their child. It was it was aware of the pain that I was going through. It was sincere, it was authentic and trying to pick me up. And then it was, listen, I can only do so much for you as your mother. You have to help yourself, and you have to do this yourself, and you have to choose to make the bed. You have an hour before you go to bed. What do you want to do for an hour? What do you want? What do you want? What can you enjoy? What can you do to get into bed, close your eyes, and say that today was not just an absolute failure and just a miserable, terrible day, and take advantage and see how you can do that. And of course, it doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen. It took a long time. It took years, and it took me even till I eventually ended up switching schools. I ended up going to the school that I wanted to go to my entire life. Sorry, for those 2 points, to those 2 years, I went to I ended up switching to the other school. It's called the Frisch School in New Jersey, Paramus, and it's closer than New York. I had more friends. It's closer to Muncie. I had more friends there. I loved the campus. The school was beautiful. The teachers are great. And by the way, and looking back, I'm sure also the other place wasn't as bad as I made it seem. But what the benefit is was that I was able to the grass, they say the grass is always greener. I got there and I'm like, this grass is just incredible. And I loved every second of school there. And I didn't do, it's funny because I actually, there's a, this will kind of lead into a larger conversation, but I'll wrap up the first part of my thoughts on this and say that if my mother did not teach me this idea of making a good day, I would be in college, or I would be studying. I studied abroad in Israel for a year and a half, and I had some really down times, really good times. And in the down times, I would just take a walk, and I would just gather myself, and I would say, make a good day. Like today's tough, and whatever reason I was unhappy. I didn't get along with the staff. I had problems with friends, or whatever it might be. Make a good day. You got it. Like you can do it. You can just make a good day. Like that's all over. That all already happened. I can't do anything about it now. Let's just let's make the best of it now. And I was able, and I did it when I was breaking up and going through serious relationships. I did it when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my professional life and was getting rejected left and right from jobs because I had an English degree and I was applying to all sorts of business jobs. And we're living in a world where an English degree is really just worthless, unfortunately, for the most part. And um, and through everything, through it all, if I didn't have those 2 years of being taught and just being told over and over and over again, I'm so sorry. I know today's tough. Today's going to be for the best for you. Just make a good day from here on out. If I didn't have that, I wouldn't have been able to get through everything else. I really don't. I would have been much unhealthier. I would have tried to numb my pain. I wouldn't have tried to embrace it. I would have tried to know. I would never give myself the space to spend time with myself, to get to know myself, because it would have hurt too much. And I learned to embrace that and to deal and to look at myself and deal with loneliness. And there's an incredible quote actually I read from. I was reading a book by Aldous Huxley, who's a famous writer. He wrote The Brave New World, and he wrote a book called The Doors of Perception, which at the time is, and he wrote the book. It's about a psychedelic experience. Um, but one thing that he wrote, which is one of the most beautiful things and one of the most true things that I ever said, was that it feels that life, especially with people, is all about trying to not be lonely. You live for your relationships, you live for your community, but at the end of the day, you die alone. At the end of the day, you experience the truest, deepest joy, you know, with yourself and in moments with yourself and by yourself. And you experience the most pain and tragedy alone, even though we work so hard to not be alone and to surround ourselves with healthy people. That is to help fortify who we are in our sense of what makes us um, ourselves, but without all that, without learning how to make a good day, I never would. I don't think I ever would have been able to take the steps that were necessary in order to learn how to be myself. And so when I experience moments of joy, when I experience moments, the real moments in my life of depth, of joy, of profound meaning, the day of my wedding, the day my child was born, the day that I was able to, speak, in front of my friends and family and thank my parents the day before, the weekend before I got married, and thank my parents for every ounce of blood, sweat, and tears that they gave me. And when my son was born, to stand up in front of my congregation and my community, and to speak about the people, the hopes and dreams that I have for my son. And I wasn't living these moments with you know with other people. These moments were the most special moments of my life because I felt it myself. I felt the depth and the truth of the words that I was saying, and I felt the depth and the meaning and of what uh, I felt like this was me. This was these reasons are the reasons I'm on this planet, and these are the moments that my life is worth living. And I don't know that I would have been able to experience those without the tools my parents gave me, my mom gave me, by being able to do something like this. So that was one thing that I was really thinking a lot about the other day. The other thing was also just in terms of school tangentially, because this also has to do with school. And again, I have a lot. I think very frequently about education. And I think very frequently about being able to make the world a better place. And I think very frequently about what could we do to make this world different, and how challenging it seems, how challenging it is, to make a difference. How it seems to make a difference. And one of the things that I think that is part of that formula is education. I think it's a huge part of that. I think it's without it, without education, without great educators, taking without encouraging and taking advantage and helping develop all the greatness of the youth of the world that are tomorrow's future and tomorrow's leaders, without caring about them and without helping them along and without taking the time and the effort to see how each one of them work and how each one of them function and how each one of them operate and how they grow and what works for them and what's the best way to encourage the most productivity and the most creativity and the most passion from them. Without that, we don't have anything. I was watching the movie Miracle with my younger brother, who was 14. He never saw it before. Miracle on Ice, about the 1980 U.S. Olympic team, and they play the Soviets, who won 20 years, I believe, of Olympic Games straight, and the world's best team. And it was all just a matter of finding hope. There's a speech that the president gave at the time. I forgot which president it was. Um, he said, for the first time in American history, Americans believe that the next 5 years are going to be worse than the previous 5 years. And we have to reinvest in our youth. We have to reinvest in our children. And while the president's giving that speech, you have the video of this U.S. hockey team, and these guys are playing football in the snow, and they're throwing snowballs at each other and laughing and having a great time. And there's something that was so magical. There's a clear nourishment of the human spirit that was going on, and hope for the future. And even if the country at large didn't feel it, that this group of kids, this group of teenagers, this group of hockey players that were from college were not only able to feel that themselves, but they were able to ultimately supply the hope and a vision for America after, and for however long it lasted. And I think that the way to do that and to recapture that in today's world and in our lives is by caring about education, is by caring about the way we raise the people of tomorrow. And and I think that, and so I don't learn conventionally. For example, I do love to learn. I really, really love to learn. I love to learn via storytelling, and experiences. So, for example, I'm not very good at directions and figuring out where I'm going and memorizing, how to get from point A to point B. But once I will drive through an area or walk through an area a couple of times, especially without my maps on or my Waze on, or my Google Maps or whatever it is, and I make my way through it. Because of the experience, I create a real life, a living association of, okay, this is what this is, and this is where this is, and this is how this is supposed to fit in with this. I learn in terms of like puzzle pieces and how everything fits in with one another and how everything correlates with one another. If I was able to, and I thought my entire life that I was miserable at science, and I was miserable at math, and I was miserable at, at anything that's really not humanities, not history, not English, not writing, not reading, whatever art, whatever it might be. Um, and then I understand the language of relationship. And then I found some teachers online, some podcasters, and Huberman is among them. And then I find his guests, many of his guests are truly, truly excellent teachers. And and then I realized I'm not bad at science. They're teaching a language that I can learn, and they're speaking in a way that I can process. And I don't know what would have happened in my life and what my life would have been like if I went through high school and college with that knowledge that, hey, this is how I learn, and I'm not really bad at science, and I'm not really bad at biology, I'm not really bad at psychology, I'm not really bad at physics. I just have to learn it a certain way. Um, and I had to make the effort to learn a certain way. And I have to, and now that I'm teaching, even though it's only two classes, I feel a responsibility to try to help each kid in my class, and it's not many. I mean, right now I believe I'm teaching 22 students total, 10th grade, so 14, 15 years old, maybe 16. And um, and then I have my previous students from previous years where I do my best to engage them in asking questions like, what do you think of your class? Do you like it? What don't you like about it? What don't you like the way that the teacher is communicating? What don't you like about, like, how do you think you would be able to learn better and get this better? And there are certain times where they're able to express it, and there's certain times where I have to try to, work with them and help them along. And then, but then I'm able to kind of also capitalize on on each student's natural skill and encourage it. So, for example, my first year teaching, I do this assignment where the class writes a 5-page movie script. It's a short or a movie scene, and I show them the format for a script, and I show them how it works. I explain you got to make sure that the conversation sounds authentic, that the conversation sounds like something that you would actually hear in real life, and let them go. And there was one kid, and they had a week to do the assignment. They had, I think, 3 days to write this, 2 days to submit a script, or 3 days to submit a script, and then another 2 or 3 days of shooting. And shooting can be done anywhere on campus. Uh, they could they could be they could be doing anything. They could recruit anyone if they need more people on their scene. They had total, pretty much total creative freedom, of course, for whatever's appropriate for a high school 10th grader or 11th grader. Um, which they ultimately didn't listen to anyway, but that's another story. Um, there was one student who was always quiet, and you could tell he was a good student. You could tell he was very smart, but he was very quiet and not engaged, generally speaking, in class. He was kind of just minding his own business. If I asked him a question, he would always be paying attention and give an answer, but he wouldn't really like kind of pick up. And this kid took charge of this assignment, and he actually probably spent a month on it. Ended up handing in to me like almost a 20-page script, or 25-page script. And he's coming up with different scene ideas and plots, and he's coming up with characters and their relationship to one another. And then all the other students are so excited about how well that he is, how good he is at this, and how much effort he's putting into this, and how thoughtful and passionate he is about it, that they started listening to him, and they were crowding around him, and he was taking charge, and they got, better camera gear. And I actually don't think I even saw the script to this day, because the movie to this day, because he was trying so hard to get like the right movie, and then he couldn't figure out how to get it onto from his camera, his professional camera that he was shooting on, how to get it onto a computer for himself. I don't know. But I pulled him over at the end of the assignment, and I said, first of all, thank you very much for showing me just like how, for doing such a great job and really, really, taking this seriously and putting your all into this. It really means so much to me. And I said, listen, this is something you're clearly very good at. I said, English class is about comprehension. It's about your ability to articulate yourself. It's about your ability to express yourself in person and on paper. And I was like, as far as I'm concerned, you're doing that. And if you want to spend the next couple of months actually developing a script, I was like, an average script, I said, I think it's a minute of screen time per page, right? So if you have a 5 minute, if you have a 5 page script, it's a 5 minute movie. If you have a 20 page script, it's generally a 20 minute movie. Now, of course, as movies have kind of come along and CGI is kind of taking a bigger part, you can have one line, Avengers fight, and that could be a 5-10 minute scene. But short of that, most of the time with screenplays, I was like, so your screenplay, I was like, if you really want, you can make this in a 120 page script. You can make this the length of a movie. You can make it a 50 page script or a short film, whatever it is that you want to do. And I was like, and I'll give you, and I will give you all the space and all the freedom to make that happen. Um, he didn't. I don't think he did not end up taking me up on it. He said he'd rather be participating with the rest of the class, whatever everyone's keeping up with. He didn't want to feel like he was like isolated or doing his own thing. Um, but his parents still run into my grandparents. They both live in Miami Beach to this day, and they're always talking about that. And they always and I told parents also parent teacher conferences. I didn't want it to be any kind of surprise. Said, your son is so talented in this aspect. And I gave him scripts to, I get my uncle, my great uncle, was part of the Writers Guild. And so he would get a lot, he's still, even though has been working for 20 years, 15 years, he still gets scripts sent to him every year about the newest, the movies that are coming out because he still could vote for the best screenplay. And so he sends them off to me. He doesn't read them anymore. He sends a lot of them to me, and then so I would give them to the student. And this is just one example, and this is just one example of one student, because there are other students that I figured out. I had another student. I think this one is really one of them. I was thinking the most about this because this realization really hit me just a couple of days ago, and I haven't really had a chance to talk it out. But I have one student who I last year was a second year teaching, and until that point, I felt that there was no student in my class that was unintelligent. I really, really didn't think so. I thought they were all very, very smart. I thought they were all very charismatic. I thought they were all very creative. I thought that, and obviously some more than others, but one lacked in creativity, another he compensated for with another equally important skill. And none of these students were subpar in terms of their intelligence. And there's one student that I felt was really behind the class last year. And not behind the class, I thought this might have been like the first time that I may have had a less intelligent student in my class. But it was strange because outside of like, no matter how kind I was during class or how patient I was during class, he didn't seem to get it. And then one day, um, but outside of class, he was more with it, and he would talk to me, and he would carry on an intelligent conversation for an extended period of time, and he would keep on going, and he was funny, and he made jokes, and he was charismatic, but he wasn't like this. But it was very infrequent that I saw it in the classroom, and even when I would give him softball questions and answers and assignments, he couldn't seem to pull himself together to even deal with the most basic thing. He was trying to, he said, and he had a very difficult time. My standards as a teacher is English class, you're going to have to express yourself and you're going to have to be detailed with the way that you talk, the way that you think, and the way that you tell stories, right? So how was your weekend? When I ask you that, that's part of the class, and part of the answer is not just to say good. Tell me the story. Tell me what happened. Tell me the nuance. Tell me the details. Tell me, what exactly was happening, and communicate with me, or express yourself to me. And he just didn't even seem to be able to do that at any kind of tangible level. And I was going back and forth with his parents because I said, listen, I said it's not doing him any favors to be in my class. I said I don't want him to do badly. Unfortunately, he's not keeping up with the rest of the class. I said, I don't want him to do badly. I don't want him to feel like he is. I said, it's so, because I know, and I don't think parents quite realize this as often as they maybe should. Um, I said, I don't want him to feel like he's an idiot and give up on himself. And I don't want him to quit on himself. And I just don't have the time out of 17, 18 students to give him the attention that he needs to succeed in this class, to make and not only that, I'm afraid that I'm actually going to not have enough attention that he'll actually think that he's dumb, and it'll be to his detriment that he's in this class. And this could impact him for a really long period of time. And his parents didn't really want to hear it. Their initial response, which I thought was one of the worst responses I've ever received from a parent in my entire life, was, what did he do wrong? Should we punish him? And I was like, what are you guys talking about? What are you talking about? Punish him? I said, I'm telling you that his basic skills are not up to par for a class. He's not doing anything wrong. And I did preface, I try my best, especially when I'm communicating with parents. I think that's important that parents know that the teachers are on their side, and that the teachers and the parents should be a unit. And so when I begin with a criticism, or something's going on with a student in class, or the way they're behaving, or lack of work that they're doing, I'll say, I really, really love whatever the student's name is. And he's a really wonderful boy. I'm so happy that I'm teaching him. I'm so happy he's in my class. I said there's just a couple of things that I think we have to work on for his own sake that'll really get him really far, and I think he'll do really, really well for himself. And when you start off on that page, you're not combative. You're not fighting one another. You're collaborating. You're working with one another. And I said to them, so I'd say to them, so I said to his parents, I love this young man. He's funny, he's sweet, he's caring. And the way I could tell is not only, most high school students, I think there's a matter of maturity. And I think that unfortunately, if you don't mature, then you get a lot of adults like this too, which there are. The world revolves exclusively around them, and there's a very and the world and people are not necessarily always aware that there's other lives going on outside of their own. And maybe you come up with a million excuses or potential reasons, and whatever it is, I don't really care what it is. I don't really, I don't want to. It's not. I'm not trying to. I'm just trying to make that point and say that, so I have a student. So I'll say, how was your weekend? My weekend was, great. Oh, wait. And then I'd follow up and I'd be engaging. What'd you do? Who were you with? What was a highlight? And and then they would not eat, they would not respond by asking about myself, about asking about my weekend, um, which I actually taught them to do. I said, if you want to succeed in life, you have to show the people that you're dealing with that you care about them, and to follow up with questions about them, and to see how they are, and to make them feel as if that you're on their side, and you guys are a team and you care. Um, Even if it's a total stranger, just to be on good terms with them. And this young man would always come up to me, and I would say, "How was your weekend?" And he'd say, it was nice. I did this. How was yours?" And I'd say, "It was great. It was a little tired. I'm a little tired. It was a little hard. I was planning lessons." "Oh yeah." He goes, "How's what was hard about it? How's your kid? How's your wife?" My baby was just born at the time, and he was engaged, and not only engaged, he was sweet and asking me questions. So when the parents asked me, what did he do wrong? Should we punish him? I'm going to take away his privileges. He loves to do this, but I don't think he'll be able to. I said, you guys have it wrong. So this has nothing to do with it. Anyway, we made our way through the year, and I come back to teach this year again. And I walk into my basic class. So this is the quote unquote lower class. And one of the benefits, I think, of actually that class being the way, the class that it is, um, a huge benefit is that there's, I think, only 8 or 9 students in it. And so I really do have the time to give attention to each student. And I noticed that, and this same young man that previously I was trying to get down into the lower class, he was in my class as well. And oh, welcome, young man. It's good to see you again. You know, like that kind of feeling where you didn't do well in the teacher's class, but you know that you guys aren't on bad terms. You know, it just you didn't do well, and now how what we have to feel each other out and see what's going, see what the year is going to be like. And this kid is not necessarily the most kept together young man. He usually has a button, unbuttoned incorrectly on his shirt, or his shoelaces are untied, or he loses his backpack and his folders, and his papers are always spilling everywhere. Kind of like, yeah, no, I don't want to give any examples, uh, but but a lot of students laugh at him, and a lot of the students will mock him and make fun of him. And it's something that I really I don't allow in the classroom, but there's only so much that I could really do. And he was giving, and we're doing an assignment. We're talking about, we're having a class debate, and he got up to try to make his argument. He was excited about it. You could see he was excited about it behind his eyes. And you could see that, like, he asked me, he wanted to volunteer, and he really pushed to kind of come up. And he gets up, and then someone makes a joke about him, and the whole class, the other students start laughing, and he just, and you could see he had that lost look in his eye, and it actually is like one of the most, I don't want to call it animalistic, but most instinctual and um, primal. That's the word, primal parts experiences that you can have when you're embarrassed in public, and your body, this primal embarrassment or fear or social rejection, or whatever word you want to describe it, whatever you want to describe it, takes over you. It just floods your body. And I saw in his face, and he wasn't able to talk. And I asked him just a regular, a very softball regular question. What do you think of this? And he'd say, I think and you could tell he wasn't there. His brain had shut off, and I think it had to do. And so I after a couple more tries, I said, okay, we'll just call it here. Towards the end of class, I had him stay behind for a minute, and I said, number one, I apologize that everyone is laughing at you. I don't think that was. I think that was wrong. And I said, I also apologize for not standing, for not doing anything. The problem is, I said, I hope you understand that as a teacher, I said, me telling them to leave you alone might potentially only work short term, but it's certainly not going to last a long time. And I said, and they actually might make things worse after class later on. And I said, instead, I said, listen, I said, do me a favor. I said, I know it's not going to be easy, and you're not going to be able to do it for very long, and it's not going to be simple. I said, from now on, if you're in front, if we're in class and we're talking, and if someone starts to make a joke about you, and or someone's laughing at you, I was like, do your absolute best to just don't think about them. Look at me in the face, look at me in the eye for as long as you can, and just forget that they're there. It's just me and you. And I said, and when they realize that it's not, when they realize that you're not, that it doesn't bother you, that you're better than that you're beyond it, then they're going to leave you alone, and this will all be over. And I'm afraid that may have been, a big part of the problem in the past, is the self-confidence getting made fun of. And I think that there's certain people, everyone reacts differently. And his reaction to this primal fear and embarrassment is to shut down. Some people get defensive, some people get mad, some people cry, some people make jokes. You could just see his spirit leave, his consciousness leave his eyes. Um, and I feel so lucky and fortunate that I hope that I can acknowledge this and talk to him, and get and help him with it, because this could be the potential to change the entire trajectory of this young man's life. And I think that we have to have patience with one another and to really try to look at where other people are coming from, and real life experiences like this are so important with friends and with family. And teaching doesn't there's a great 19th century Jewish scholar that wrote prolifically, very philosophically, named Samson Raphael Hirsch, and he believes that all the world's problems. He writes this many, many times throughout various essays and various, just commentary and thoughts on various Jewish topics. He says that all the world's problems come from a lack of education, or from a fault in education, and we don't take the time. He says you don't have to be a teacher, you don't have to be a teacher by trade, but to take the time and to live your life as though you're a teacher, and to live and to treat people with the patience that you have, that they're as if they're in your class, and try to understand them and understand that the way they work, and then speak their language, because everyone speaks a different emotional language, and everyone requires a different type of response, and everyone requires a different type of thought process. He said, whether you're a teacher or not, you have to live like one. And the more I've been thinking about it, I really, really believe that's the biggest problems in today's world come from, generally speaking, a disconnect in communication with other humans, and and people not understanding one another, and one another's motives, and other people's perspectives, and not taking the time to try to. Again, it doesn't mean to not have your own ideas and thoughts. Teachers generally are coming from a place of being prepared, being educated, being thought out, being experienced, being patient, being kind. You have to be your own person, but in order to really be a really great teacher, you have to know that you're not just being a soundboard. You're communicating and interacting with a different life every single time that you talk to one. So I think that I think we could use a lot of this, and I hope that if there's anything that if there's any episode that gets out, or if I could try to emphasize this as often as possible in my life, and try to have a positive impact on the way that we look at the responsibility of teaching, because teaching is not known as a prestigious job in the country, and it's almost kind of sad to be a teacher. You meet someone, you're like, oh well, doesn't make a lot of money. Yikes, you meet a teacher and you're like, oh, what could that person not do? I wonder what kind of degree they got, And sometimes, sometimes obviously more than others, but I think that we got to live with the perspectives of being teachers. And I think that if we do, we can really, really change the world of tomorrow, the future generation, and all of our lives, and just make everything better for our world for a very long time. All right. Hopefully I'll be back with another episode with a couple of guests this week. But that's it for today. Bye, everyone.